Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
So on average for our users today, we save something between $10 and up to $40, $50 a month by consuming our product instead. So savings is one. The other one then, of course, is that you're getting a localized experience based on your community.
That was Magnus Larsson, the CEO of Majority, and he is my special guest this week on episode 223 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. Magnus grew up snowboarding and mountain biking in the mountains of Sweden, only to find himself now with more ocean than mountains and absolutely no snow. Magnus has always had a genuine passion for people, and it was this passion that fueled the idea for a company dedicated to promoting the thriving potential of the U.S. immigration population. Majority is a digital banking platform for immigrants. While banking is their core product, their customers also benefit from other cross-border services, such as sending money, calling internationally, and most importantly, establishing a community connection outside of their native country. Tune in to hear Magnus talk about his journey to the role of CEO, including where he sees the industry going in the next 2 to 3 years as it relates to the future of neo versus niche banks, small businesses that are started by immigrants, and much, much more. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Magnus. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. If you don't mind, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
So my name is Magnus. I'm from Sweden. I'm an immigrant from Sweden here in the US. I live now down in Miami. Originally, I'm from a small city in the north of Sweden, born and raised close to a ski slope. Snowboarding, mountain biking was my big thing growing up. But over the years, moved around the world a few times and ending up here in Miami.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the company Majority. So please tell the audience a little bit about the company and what you do.
Yeah, so Majority is a digital bank and more for immigrants. You can think about it in one way as a prime subscription offering, so to say. We're trying to offer a vast set of services where banking is the core, but also you have cross-border products such as sending money, calling, etc. And also at some point, we're also going to add some local products that you need. And our idea is basically to build a product that helps people, thrive and succeed better in the US.
Okay. So are your customers just in the US or are they all over the world?
So if you look at migration, there's 300 million immigrants around the world. 2/3 of them are living in the Western world, 50 million here, first generation immigrants here in the US, such as me, but from many various places, right? So we decided to start here in the US because this is the largest, it's a nation of immigrants. It started here and you have the largest populations where, being an immigrant in this country is quite complicated, so to say, to get started in many ways, and banking being one of the major things. So yeah, we're focused here in the US.
Okay. And I would assume one of the challenges is sort of getting the name brand out. You don't have a branch on every corner and, nor probably hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on marketing. So how do you market to that specific demographic?
Well, that's a great question. If you think in one way what we're doing, you've seen all of those check cashing stores and the payday loan stores and all of them. And in one way, we're kind of replacing all of those, right, into a digital product where we combine that. But one of the things when it comes to being an immigrant, the reason why all of those kiosks, so to say, to also exist today is because going into a bank branch can sometimes be intimidating in many aspects. The most obvious thing, of course, could be the language, but many times it's also the challenges that you have of you not fully understanding the system. It could be also partially like understanding exactly what type of documents you need, etc., because you're not born and raised, to say, into the system here today. So the way that we market ourselves, though, is because the trust that you have within the community. I'm a Swedish immigrant, right? I can only be representative for Swedish, and when you're Swedish, there's a lot of things that are so to say, unique for me coming here, or for Swedes in general. As an example, I had to, even though I've been driving for 20 years, I have to retake my driver's license when I got here, right? I have to go to DMV and do a lot of that, and etc. While if I would have been German, I could have just shown my German ID or my German driver's license, and the US would have given me one. And that is because the relationships between countries and many times. So what we've done is that we built a technical, you could say, a platform, because the problems that you're having are the same. And the brand and the values that we share when you come to a new country are also the same. But when it comes to the experience and the high touch, is that we have built what we call advisors, where we have people from your community, meaning that if you're Cuban and you move to the US, you will meet a Cuban that will tell you how it works, will explain what type of documents you need to get started. They will help you on board, explain how everything is working. So customer support and the advisor that you meet when you're getting started will be from your community. And by that, giving you a much more unique kind of experience onboarding you onto this digital product, which is also maybe something that you haven't been used on consuming these type of products, because you might have been used to go to Western Union on the store to send money or something. But now you can do all of this in a digital way instead.
Okay. And do you see most people, when they come to the app or the mobile banking platform, are they using it for money transfers, for actually getting a debit card? What's sort of the most popular use case?
Well, the core of what we're doing, right, is the banking side. So the basic, the checking account and the card connected to it, so you can get paid, you can move money, and you can have that. That is the core of what we're doing, so to say. But then, and that is fairly similar among our user, the different communities that we're working with. But then they're slightly different depending on a little bit. The share of usage between the multi-service that we're offering is slightly different depending on which community you come from, so to say, right? As of today, it's very complex to send money to Venezuela, as an example. So you might not use, and we actually don't even offer remittances to Venezuela specifically, but then you might be using our feature to pay for your mobile phone bill down in Venezuela. You might be using the service to call to your friends and family down there. So, and depending a little bit on which diaspora, we see some nuances. But the core of our product today is the banking and the money movement, so to say, within that, and the remittances. But then we have in this ability to do bill payments in some, and mobile bills, the main one, and then also calling back and making sure that the money that you potentially send arrive. Those are, so to say, the foundation of our product today, which is also the things that people spend a lot of money today. When you go to the local store and kiosk, right? I mean, even back in the days, you had to buy these scratch cards, if you remember, to call internationally, right? And those were fairly costly. And still today, just that simple product in one way is a $70 billion US market with huge margins. And basically what we're doing with our offering is that we're taking away all the margins, because we charge a monthly fee. So you become a subscription user. You pay this monthly fee, and basically we're taking away as much cost as all the unnecessary fees that is out there that are driven by these physical locations, basically.
Okay. And it's completely membership or fee based. You pay a monthly fee, and I see on your website it, I assume, starts at $5.99 a month. Does that sound right?
That's correct. We have one subscription. That's it. That's what you pay, and then you get access to this variety of services, and then you consume them either free or some of them basically at production cost, you can say.
Okay. And you mentioned something I didn't even really think about is sort of those money transfer retail locations that people go to. In some ways, I would assume are a competitor. And then I would assume, you're also competing against traditional banking in some ways. So what differentiates you from all those competitors or competitive forces out there?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, so to say, competition for us, right? Since we're having multiple products in that aspect. And in one way, you can think about almost every diaspora or every community have a variety of solutions also based on each city. So if you add all of that up, in one way, you have thousands of competitors in many ways. But if you go then to the bigger ones, like if you think about like the traditional banks, or you think about the traditional remittance players, Well, first, both of them is that we're working community by community, so that we have this local touch, that there will be someone from your community meeting you and onboarding you. That is one thing. But then also the main thing behind, so to say, if you compare to remittance, if you think of remittance, right, you go into Western Union, you pay $10 usually to send money. That was the traditional. And then you had the new digital players coming around, Remitly, Wise, and etc. Right, and they basically build a digital product, and you pay $5, but they're using that only that one product, and they survive. Their business are built that they're charging these fees. What we're doing instead is that we're saying, well, these fees you don't pay, you pay the one monthly, but you can consume any, so you can save money. So on average for our users today, we save something between $10 and up to $40, $50 a month by consuming our product instead. So savings is one. The other one then, of course, is this, that you're getting a localized experience based on your community. And then if you think about the general banking system today, it's quite complex. We spend a lot of time innovating and finding solutions. And also part of that is, of course, having this local advisor that can help you through the onboarding, but also looking at data differently and analyzing. And as an example, we are accepting you to onboard onto our bank if you can provide any ID that is government issued from somewhere in the world. So we spend a lot of times looking into how can we verify all the different types of ID, because as you know, one of the major things around KYC and CIP process is about verifying that you are you. So spend a lot of time on and a lot of money and effort, so to say, to do that extremely well, so to say, and making it also simple for the user, of course.
Sure. And you've had several rounds of funding. What do your investors see in this business? Why are they willing to put their investment dollars into this? What is it about Majority in this market that they really like?
Well, I think in the neobank space or the digital banking space, right, it's been now for quite some time in the market. And I think we didn't come into this specifically of like the main purpose of just building a bank. It was truly like an ambition to build a service that basically took down the barriers for you to easily get access to a lot of services that you need to thrive and succeed. But what I think they are seeing as well from an investor perspective is that immigrants in general has been, I would call it even like predatory fees targeted towards this consumer base. And if you think about all the money that you're paying, like if you take remittance as an example, right, there's $7 billion sent, there's like 8-9 margin percentage points left in that business, which is fairly high. And I think our business model is that we never went after the free users out there. We had a very clear idea on how our business model, but a real problem with a business model to solve it, which was good both for the customers, and there's also an opportunity to build a substantial business around it. So I think that in combination has been the main things.
Sure. Well, where do you see, we typically talk about it from the payments industry perspective, but where do you see sort of this segment of the industry going in the next couple of years?
I'm actually quite excited about the coming years too. When it comes to sort of say digital banking, then if we take that as the portion, because I think in general, right, what we've seen during the last 10 years, like it's almost every layer of payments or banking has basically been rebuilt, for payment railways to ledgers to like basically everything is being rebuilt. So it's much easier today to start almost any type of financial service. Then when you're thinking about the consumer side, I think there are still really interesting futures, so to say, to be seen here, where we had the traditional neobanks that I think came into the market with lower cost models, and they were able to acquire, so to say, the younger generations because they're more digital experience. And then we see in the niche wave, which I think has been the last 3-4 years, where you have basically as many niches or many things you can think about. I think there popped up a digital bank in the space. I think my prediction is that we will see a lot of these neobanks going away, because I think if you don't have a real problem to solve, you're going to have a hard. And on top of that, if you don't have a real business model, that you also find a way to do this business. Because I think a lot of ideas that they focused on a niche, and then they were thinking building a bank based on interchange. And I think the interchange, it's just comparison in Europe. I'm from Europe, and here in the US, your interchange margins here in the US is much higher than in Europe. And you're seeing a lot of these neobanks, I think, like, are they all going to go into lending? Because that's where you usually end up, right? If you're going to start making interest, So it's going to be a really interesting see. And I think we already see it last year when the market changed as well, that there's been quite a few digital banks out there that has been closing shop. And I think that's been mainly to, well, the environment first, but also that they're struggling to find a business model, and maybe the business, the problems are, like a real problem, so to say.
Right. So do you foresee Majority getting into small businesses, just knowing that a lot of immigrants do come to the U.S. and start small businesses, many very successful at starting businesses? Is that an area that you guys have looked into or plan to get into?
I think it's a super interesting space. Just the statistics, right? I think the migrant population of the US is around 11, 12% of the total population. But then when you're looking at small businesses in the US, 23% of them are started by immigrants. So of course, that is a space that is super interesting. I think that is an avenue to, if I look a little bit on a longer roadmap, that is of course exciting. But I still feel that we have so much still left to be done. So say on just this, I mean, there's still 50 million people here in the US, right, that should cater for our product. And we're in the starting point of our business. So quite a lot of things left to be done here. And also a lot of products in the surrounding space that I think is quite troublesome on that journey to build your life here in the US that you need.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned one of the differentiators being around having the personal advisor. So maybe I think because that is important, maybe talk about that a little more. So do you physically have people in locations across the US? Is it sort of done over Zoom, or sort of how does that personal touch actually get executed?
Yeah, so what we do is that when we start a community, so to say, and start working with that, we hire people within, or we offering, there's just different ways that you can work for us, either as an independent contract, but also as an employee. And then we're partnering with the local stores and the local community, so to say. And we are basically having advisors standing in high traffic locations where they meet customers from their community. It could be a grocery store, it could be a hairdresser, it could be basically any type of physical location. So here in Florida, we have hundreds of advisors, as an example, and we started. This was our starting point, and also within Texas. So those has been the two main states. And when you look at immigration in general in the US as well, you see that a lot of, depending on which community you're looking at, they have a focal point, you can say, almost like a capital. You were in Texas, right? And in Houston, as an example, a Nigerian diaspora, which is very large. And you have here in Miami, maybe the most obvious, right, city, you have around 2 million Cubans inside of the US. You have around almost 900,000 around the Hialeah area, etc. So you usually have this concentration. And then, of course, this is communities that are also highly referral. And for us, it's important to be the community, and that's why we're hiring people. Like, again, I can be the Swedish immigrant representative, but I can't be for, as an example, the Nigerian in Houston or the Cuban here in Miami.
Right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. So if you don't mind, tell us about your journey to your role there as the CEO of Majority.
Well, so my background originally is from the big corporate world in some aspects. I spent the first years of my career within a Swedish investment group called Kinnevik, and I spent my years in their telco. So I started, I also then, the last thing I did, I managed one of the largest telecom operators in Sweden called Comvik. And 8 years ago, me and my co-founders, we ended up not starting Majority then, but we built a company called Rebtel, which has been a cross-border platform, starting with calling, but also other types of services also for the same communities as we serve today, but on a global scale with customers, millions of customers globally, so to say. So that was our second type of thing. And then when we founded Majority, we did that 4 years ago now. And so to say, we were the first in the market to build what we're doing. And I think spending the last 10, 15 years building services for migrant groups around the world, I think Majority kind of came down to like that. Here's really what you need. Here's really the main market. And here's this obvious clarity of problems that you're having. And we had all been experienced we all been living in I don't know how many countries together we've been living in as a group, so to say. But I think you do the same. And for us, it was also, I mean, we come from Sweden, one of the richest countries in the world. And I moved to countries where as an example, moving to the US, I speak fairly good English. And if I still have all of the problems that I'm having, I can't lease a car. I can't, I have a problem signing for my lease on my house because I don't have a credit history, etc. Right? Then you can just imagine the scale of the problems. And I think that was what united us in the majority of that type of opportunity. And at the same time, there is not a single company, if you think about it out there today, that have built a brand that is thinking about, that's something that when you migrate to another country, the last thing you want to do is feel lesser. And you actually try to do a lot of things to fit in, and get into the society and to contribute. But to build a brand that you feel proud and that you feel that you are part of the majority, I think has been one of the big drivers as well, to have an aspirational, a strong brand that you feel that people can feel united around and proud about, and also good from both angles, because everyone will be in a better place if we can get faster up and running and get people to contribute in society. So,
Sure. You mentioned early on about some of the things that you did growing up in Sweden, and obviously I don't think those exact things are available in Miami. So what are some things you are passionate about? So maybe one business-related passion and one personal passion.
That's a good question. I think in general, I'm very passionate about people. And I think maybe from private, when you have gotten children, then it become a big part of your life, right? And you have a family. So family and friends, I think that always been dear to not only me, I think to most people in the world, right? But I think it's actually the same interest when it comes to business, because people are two sides. First is our customers. And I think being passionate about what their problems are and how you can solve them has been an interest, I think, even since I was a little kid, trying to figure out, solving problems, and usually around the problems that you might have yourself or that you see other people as are having. But also, I think all businesses are built on people. I think success in terms of building companies is about how great of a team you're able to get together and how passionate you're getting these people around, right? And I think that is also probably the beauty of being an entrepreneur and building a company, is that you're getting a lot of people together and you're seeing the problems you're able to solve. And I think that is sometimes, maybe that's even meaning, right? So, and I think that's what makes people excited. And so I think those comes probably on both my passions. And then I, of course, probably have some of my small, like I'm just generally, I think, an interested generalist now lately, right? Everyone, I'm trying to figure out this ChatGPT thing and how I can use it better for simplifying things in my life. And, I like everyone else. And also I think the world, lastly, maybe it's also like the changes of the world. They always have been, I think, even from a young age as well, like an interest. Polarization right now, I think, in politics is interesting. How can we solve that? There's a lot of other things that is just, I think, interesting to try to figure out what can be done as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of that in the U.S., whether it's politics or society in general. So let me know when you have those problems solved.
Yeah, I'll get back to you another time maybe.
Right. Well, your conversation and your discussion around people is a good segue into the last question. When people join your company or you're talking to people, say maybe they're right out of college and they're looking at the payments or the fintech or financial services as an industry they want to go to work in. So maybe they're joining your company. What advice do you give these young people just starting out? What advice do you give them to be successful in our industry?
Oh, that's also another tough question as well, right? Because usually it's a little bit individual, but in general, I think you need to look for something that makes you excited and stay curious, because I think learning is the foundation to succeed in almost anything that you want to do. And I think the payment. Someone asked me one time, I didn't come originally right from the banking, and someone asked me and I said, well, I probably wouldn't done it if I knew how hard it would be from the beginning, so to say, right? So I think that's why I think it needs to be something that you're passionate about, because when we were knocking on everyone's door here in the US saying like, hey, I'm an immigrant from Sweden. I want to build a digital product and it's a banking product. And a lot of people said no, to be very honest. And then when I continued, I also want them to be able to send money internationally. And I want them, and it's immigrants and they come from Cuba and they come from Nigeria. We probably raised, over time, I learned also that those are the biggest red flags when it comes to risk, right? So having that passion. And I think in general, when you're young and you enter a company, I think it's more important to focus on learning and also spending enough time to learn, because the more time you spend learning, the better you're going to get. And I think your early days and probably whole life depend, but especially when you're joining, it's like you need to spend that time, and you need to understand that solving difficult things takes time and a lot of effort. And I think that is every time when I see the people that makes the biggest difference is always the combination of hard work, their capabilities of solving problems, and how they interact with other people. So I think it's a, a multiplication between those three. If you do 0 on one of them, you get 0 outcome as well. So people, relationship, hard work, and capabilities. So to say, I think those are fundamental always when we're thinking about success.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Well, Magnus, we've covered a lot of ground already on obviously the company and what it does and sort of the future and the demographic you're serving, and then obviously about your personal journey. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I spoke a lot, so I'm I'm happy with what I think. I mean, majority is we're on a fantastic journey, and I'm just happy to be here with you, Greg, and being able to share a little bit about that. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you. And again, I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you being on the show today. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Greg.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.